Emma Clark didn't know that the man walking through the supernatural archives at midnight was the Alpha King of all North America. She didn't know that his amber eyes had been searching every corner of the continent for 20 years, and she certainly didn't know that when he stopped breathing the moment he saw her, it was because he'd finally found what he'd been looking for his entire life. She only knew that someone very important had just entered her sanctuary, and she was about to be in trouble. The ancient leather books surrounding her seemed to whisper warnings as his footsteps echoed through the marble halls of the Crescent Moon Archive. Emma pressed herself deeper into the shadows between the genealogy stacks, hoping her plain brown dress would help her disappear completely. Important people didn't notice assistant librarians who worked the midnight shift, especially not assistant librarians who kept their heads down and asked no questions about why they were paid in cash under a name that wasn't quite their own. But this man wasn't following the rules. Every supernatural being in the building had gone completely still the moment he entered. The night security guards stood straighter. The few researchers scattered throughout the reading rooms had stopped breathing entirely. Even Mrs. Blackwood, the head librarian who feared no one, had materialized from her office to offer assistance with trembling hands. He waved them all away with a single gesture. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs as those amber eyes swept the room with predatory precision. She'd heard whispers about eyes like those. Golden fire that could see through lies and strip away pretense. Eyes that belonged to creatures so powerful they made other alphas kneel. She tried to make herself smaller behind the ancient pack registry volumes, but it was too late. Their gazes locked across 50 feet of marble and moonlight streaming through tall windows. The book in Emma's hands tumbled to the floor with a sound like thunder. Heat shot up her spine, spreading through her chest, settling somewhere behind her sternum like a golden thread being pulled tight. The air between them crackled with something impossible, something that made her wolf stir for the first time in years, made her remember she was more than just the frightened girl who'd learned to hide. His nostrils flared slightly. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. No. This wasn't happening. Whatever this was, it was a mistake. Emma bent to retrieve the fallen book, breaking eye contact and gasping for air that suddenly felt too thin. Her hands shook as she tried to organize the genealogy records she'd been cataloguing. Maybe if she looked busy enough, professional enough, he would realize she wasn't who he was looking for and move on. The sound of expensive leather shoes on marble grew closer. "Excuse me." His voice was warm, honey poured over steel, with just enough roughness to make something deep in her chest respond. "I need assistance with some research." Emma kept her eyes fixed on the page in front of her, though the words blurred together meaninglessly. "The head librarian is Mrs. Blackwood. She'll be able to help you with anything you need. Her office is—" "I need help with the ancient pack records, bloodline research." His voice was closer now, close enough that she caught his scent. Pine and mountain air, and something wilder underneath that made her wolf whimper. "I was told you're the expert." She risked a glance up, immediately regretting it when those impossible eyes caught her again. Up close, he was devastating. Sharp cheekbones and midnight black hair, a mouth that looked like it knew exactly how to break hearts. Everything about him screamed dangerous, powerful, completely out of her league. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just an assistant, nobody important." His smile widened and something predatory flickered in those amber depths. "Emma Clark," she added quickly, offering the name she'd been using for 18 years, the name that kept her safe and invisible. He leaned against the shelf beside her, close enough that the warmth radiating from his skin made her shiver. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute certainty and something that sounded almost like relief. "Hello, Evangeline." The name hit her like a physical blow, a name she hadn't heard since she was 6 years old and terrified, hidden in a foster home where they taught her to forget everything that came before. A name that belonged to nightmares and half-remembered lullabies sung by a woman with kind eyes who smelled like roses and safety. The book slipped from her fingers again, but this time he caught it before it could fall. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, but even to her own ears the denial sounded hollow. "My name is Emma Clark. I work here. I catalogue old books and file paperwork and you've been hiding for 18 years. His voice was infinitely gentle, as if he understood exactly how fragile she felt in this moment. "But you don't have to hide any more." Something in her chest pulled tight, like a rope she didn't know she'd been carrying, suddenly going taut. The golden thread sensation strengthened, and with it came a certainty that terrified her more than any name from her past. This man knew exactly who she was, and somehow, against all logic and every survival instinct she'd developed, she wanted him to. "The pack records," she heard herself say, her voice steadier than she felt. "What specifically are you looking for?" His smile was warm enough to melt the ice that had lived in her chest for 2 decades. "Everything about the Moonhaven pack and their lost daughter." The days that followed were a whirlwind of ancient texts and stolen glances. Emma had agreed to help him research the Moonhaven pack records, though she told herself it was purely professional. The fact that her hands trembled every time he sat down beside her at the mahogany research table had nothing to do with the way his presence made her feel safer than she had in 18 years. Nothing at all. "The Moonhaven territory was established in 1847, she read from a leather-bound volume that smelled of age and secrets. "Alpha Thomas Moonhaven led his pack from the old country during the Great Migration." Her finger traced the faded ink, careful not to damage pages that were older than most countries. "They settled in the northern mountains, built a sanctuary for wolves who'd lost their homes." Dominic, he'd finally told her his name on the second night, though he still hadn't mentioned the title that made grown alphas tremble, leaned closer to examine the family tree she'd sketched from various sources, close enough that his scent wrapped around her like a protective barrier. "Tell me about the last generation," he said softly, his amber eyes fixed on her face rather than the documents. Emma's chest tightened. She'd been dreading this part, though she couldn't quite say why. "Alpha Marcus Moonhaven and his mate, Luna Catherine. They had 1 child." Her voice caught. "A daughter, born in 2005. "Evangeline," Dominic murmured, and the name on his lips sent that golden thread sensation spiralling through her chest again. "She would have been 6 when they died." Emma forced herself to keep reading, though something in her throat felt raw. "The attack happened at night. Rogues, they said. The Alpha and Luna fought to protect their pack. But—" She trailed off, staring at the death certificates that had been filed 3 days after what the reports called the Moonhaven Massacre. "But—" the daughter's body was never found. Emma's hands shook as she turned the page. "Some say she died in the fires. Others believed she escaped somehow, but a 6-year-old alone in the wilderness." She shrugged, trying to appear clinical about information that was making her feel sick for reasons she couldn't name. Dominic's hand covered hers on the ancient paper, warm and steady and impossibly gentle. "What do you think happened to her?" The contact sent electricity shooting up her arm, and Emma jerked back so quickly her chair scraped against marble. The golden thread in her chest pulled tight, protesting the distance. "I think she's dead," Emma whispered, staring at their joined hands. "I think a little girl couldn't survive losing everything and everyone she'd ever loved." "Emma." His voice was careful, tender in a way that made her eyes burn. "Look at me." She couldn't. If she looked at him, she might fall apart completely. Might admit that sometimes she had nightmares about smoke and screaming, about a woman's voice telling her to run and never look back. Might confess that the reason she knew so much about genealogy research was because she'd been searching for her own family for years without knowing their names. "Hey!" Dominic's fingers found her chin, tilting her face up until she had no choice but to meet those impossible amber eyes. "She's not dead." "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I've been looking for her for 20 years. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, catching a tear she didn't realize had fallen. Because she's sitting right in front of me, trying to pretend she doesn't remember the lullaby her mother used to sing. Emma's breath caught. I don't. Moonlight dancing, starlight bright, keep my baby safe tonight. Dominic sang softly, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones. Dream of roses, dream of home, until the dawn comes, you're not alone. The words hit her like a physical blow. She could almost hear another voice joining his, sweet and clear and achingly familiar. Could almost smell roses and feel gentle hands stroking her hair. Stop! The word came out broken. Please stop! Your mother sang it to you every night, Dominic continued, relentless and gentle. She'd sit by your bed in the nursery with the painted stars on the ceiling, and she'd sing until you fell asleep. You're wrong. But even as she said it, Emma could see it. A room filled with soft light, walls covered in hand-painted constellations, a rocking chair by the window where a woman with dark hair and kind eyes would hold her close. Your father called you his little star, Dominic whispered, said you were the brightest light in their sky. Stop, Emma gasped, pressing her hands over her ears. But the memories were flooding back now, 18 years of careful forgetting, crumbling like paper in rain. They told me my parents were dead. Car accident when I was 5. They said I had no family, nowhere else to go. They lied to protect you. Dominic's hands covered hers, gently pulling them away from her ears. The people who took you in, they were trying to keep you safe from the one who killed your parents. That's impossible. I'm nobody. I'm just Emma Clark who works in a library and pays rent for a studio apartment and... You're Evangeline Moonhaven, Dominic said firmly, last surviving member of one of the most respected pack bloodlines in North America, and you're my mate. The last words hung in the air, between them like a confession and a promise, and a threat all at once. That's impossible, Emma repeated, but her voice lacked conviction. The golden thread in her chest was singing now, recognizing truth even when her mind couldn't accept it. Is it? Dominic asked quietly. Tell me you don't feel it, this connection between us. Tell me you haven't been having dreams about a man with amber eyes who promises to keep you safe. Emma opened her mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come, because she had been dreaming about him. For weeks before he'd walked into the archive, she'd been having the same dream. A man who felt like safety and home and forever, reaching out his hand and asking her to trust him. I don't understand any of this, she whispered. Then let me help you understand. Dominic's voice was patient, steady, like he had all the time in the world to wait for her to catch up. Have dinner with me tomorrow night, not here, not surrounded by books and research, somewhere we can talk. Every survival instinct Emma had developed over 18 years of hiding screamed at her to say no, to run, to disappear the way she'd learned to do whenever someone got too close. But the golden thread in her chest pulled tight, and when she looked into Dominic's amber eyes, she saw something that terrified her more than any threat. She saw home. Okay, she heard herself say, but somewhere public, and I drive myself. Dominic's smile was warm enough to chase away the chill that had lived in her bones for 2 decades. Anywhere you want, Evangeline. I'll wait however long it takes for you to remember who you really are. The restaurant Dominic chose was everything Emma had expected and nothing she was prepared for. Moonrise was the kind of place where reservations were made months in advance, where senators and celebrities dined in privacy behind walls of glass and discretion. The kind of place where a librarian's salary wouldn't cover appetizers, let alone the wine Dominic ordered with casual familiarity. This is too much, Emma whispered as the maitre d' led them to a private table overlooking the city lights. She tugged at her simple black dress, the nicest thing she owned, but still obviously out of place among the designer gowns and tailored suits surrounding them. You deserve beautiful things, Dominic said simply, pulling out her chair with old-world courtesy that made something flutter in her chest. The golden thread sensation had been constant since she'd agreed to dinner, a warm hum just beneath her ribs that grew stronger every time he looked at her. Now, seated across from him in the flickering candlelight, it felt like her entire nervous system was vibrating in harmony with his presence. "Tell me about your life before," Dominic said after they'd ordered, his amber eyes focused entirely on her. "What do you remember?" Emma's fingers found her water glass, needing something solid to anchor her. "Foster care mostly. The Clarks were good people, but they had 5 other kids. I learned early that being quiet and helpful meant staying safe." Safe from what? The question was gentle, but it cut straight to the heart of fears she'd never named. From being sent away again, from being too much trouble, from people realizing I wasn't worth keeping. Dominic's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Someone made you believe you were worthless." "Not someone, everyone." The words slipped out before Emma could stop them. "Do you know what it's like to be the kid nobody wants? The one who gets moved from home to home because something's just wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with you." "You don't know that." Emma laughed, but there was no humour in it. "I used to have nightmares that would wake up the whole house, screaming about fire and monsters and people I couldn't remember. The social workers said it was trauma from the accident, but the dreams never stopped. Neither did the feeling that I was waiting for something terrible to happen." Dominic leaned forward, his voice dropping to something just above a whisper. What if they weren't nightmares? What if they were memories? "Don't." Emma's hands trembled as she reached for her wine. "Please don't make this into something it's not. I'm just a girl with a sad backstory and an overactive imagination." "You're a survivor." The conviction in his voice made her look up despite herself. "You're the daughter of 2 of the strongest alphas I've ever known, and you survived something that would have destroyed most adults." "Stop calling me that." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I'm not anybody's daughter. Thomas and Catherine Moonhaven are dead, and so is their little girl. I read their death certificates myself." "You read the lies that kept you alive." Dominic's hand moved across the table, not quite touching hers, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Emma, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be hard to hear." Something in his tone made her stomach clench with dread. "What?" "Your parents weren't killed by rogues. They were murdered by someone who wanted to claim their territory. Someone who's been hunting for you ever since, because as long as you're alive, you have a legitimate claim to everything he stole." The restaurant around them seemed to fade away, sound muffled like she was underwater. "That's not possible." "Marcus Bloodfang killed them in their sleep, then burned the pack house to cover his tracks. But you weren't there that night. Your mother had sent you to stay with pack friends because she'd been having dreams about danger coming." Dominic's voice was steady, matter of fact, delivering devastating information like a weather report. "When the friends realised what had happened, they panicked. They knew Marcus would come for you next, so they called in favours, got you into the human foster system where pack law couldn't reach you." "Stop!" Emma pushed back from the table so hard her chair scraped against marble. Several other diners turned to look, but she couldn't bring herself to care. "This is insane! You're talking about murder and conspiracies and the reason you've spent 18 years afraid to trust anyone." Dominic stood as well, moving around the table with predatory grace. "The reason you chose a job where you could hide in plain sight, surrounded by books instead of people. The reason you pay rent in cash under a false name and never stay in one place too long." Each word hit like a physical blow, because it was true. All of it was true, and Emma had never questioned why she lived like someone perpetually ready to run. "How do you know all this?" she whispered. "Because I've been looking for you since you disappeared." Dominic's hands found her shoulders, warm and steady and impossibly gentle. "Because the night your parents died, your father called me. He was my friend, my ally, and he was dying. With his last breath, he begged me to find his daughter and keep her safe." "Why would he call you?" But even as she asked, Emma was beginning to understand. The way everyone in the archive had reacted to his presence. The deference, the fear, the way grown alphas had literally bowed their heads. "Because I'm Dominic Steele," he said quietly, "Alpha King of North America, and you, Evangeline Moonhaven, are my fated mate." The words hit her like a tidal wave. Alpha King, the most powerful shifter on the continent, the one who commanded the loyalty of every pack from Alaska to Mexico. And he was claiming that she, nobody, nothing, worthless little Emma Clark, was destined to be his equal. That's impossible. But even as she said it, the golden thread in her chest was singing with recognition, with rightness, with a certainty that terrified her more than any of his revelations. "Is it?" Dominic stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Tell me you don't feel it, Evangeline. Tell me this connection between us is just coincidence." Emma opened her mouth to deny it, but the words died in her throat. Because she could feel it. Had been feeling it since the moment their eyes met across the archive. A pull deeper than attraction, stronger than desire. Something that felt like coming home after being lost for 18 years. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know." His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones with devastating tenderness. "But you don't have to be scared anymore. I'll protect you. From Marcus, from anyone who tries to hurt you. You're mine now, and I protect what's mine." "What if you're wrong?" The question came out broken. "What if I'm not who you think I am? What if I'm just some damaged girl who's been living a lie for so long she doesn't know the truth anymore?" Dominic's smile was soft enough to break her heart. "Then we'll figure it out together. But Emma, look at me. Really look." She did, and saw something that made her breath catch. In his amber eyes she saw recognition. Not just attraction or desire, but the bone-deep certainty of someone who'd found what they'd been searching for their entire life. "You're everything," he whispered. "You're my mate, my queen, my other half, and I've been waiting 30 years for you." "Dominic, I know it's overwhelming. I know you need time to process all of this." His hands framed her face like she was something precious and fragile. "But there's something else you need to know. Marcus is still out there, and if he finds out you're alive, he'll come for me." Emma's voice was steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "Yes, which is why I need you to let me protect you. Come with me to the royal compound. Let me keep you safe while we figure out how to deal with him." Every instinct Emma had developed over 18 years of hiding screamed at her to run. To disappear into the night the way she always had when things got too complicated, too dangerous, too real. But as she stared into Dominic's eyes, she realized something that changed everything. For the first time in her life, running felt more dangerous than staying. "Okay," she whispered, and watched his entire body relax with relief. "Okay, I'll come with you." The words felt like stepping off a cliff, but the golden thread in her chest was practically vibrating with approval. "But I need to go home first, get some things, tie up loose ends." Dominic's smile was brilliant enough to light up the entire city. "Whatever you need, Evangeline, we have all the time in the world." Neither of them knew that across the city, in a penthouse apartment overlooking the harbour, Marcus Bloodfang was staring at surveillance photos of a girl who looked exactly like the woman he'd been hunting for 18 years. And for the first time since that night in the mountains, he was smiling. Emma made it exactly 47 miles out of the city before the pain hit. She'd left Dominic standing in the restaurant parking lot, watching her drive away with something that looked dangerously close to heartbreak in his amber eyes. She'd promised she just needed one night to pack her things, to process everything he'd told her, to prepare herself for a life she'd never imagined. What she hadn't told him was that every survival instinct she'd honed over 18 years was screaming at her to run, to disappear the way she always had when things got too complicated, too intense, too real. But the golden thread in her chest had other plans. The farther she drove from the city, the more it felt like someone was pulling her ribcage apart from the inside. By mile 30, her hands were shaking on the steering wheel. By mile 40, she was gasping for breath between waves of agony that had nothing to do with anything physical and everything to do with the supernatural bond she was trying to deny. At mile 47, she pulled over on the side of the highway and threw up everything she'd eaten at dinner. "This is insane," she whispered to her steering wheel, pressing her forehead against the cool leather. "People don't just have mystical connections. This isn't real." But even as she said it, Emma could feel the truth settling in her bones. The mate bond was real, and it was trying to drag her back to Dominic with a force that made gravity look like a gentle suggestion. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Come back to me, Evangeline, please." She stared at the screen until it blurred, then made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff for the second time in one night. She turned the car around. Emma was 3 blocks from her apartment when she realized she was being followed. The black sedan had picked her up at the highway exit, maintaining a careful distance but matching every turn she made through the quiet residential streets. Her foster father had been a cop. He'd taught her to watch for tails as a basic safety precaution for a young woman living alone. This was no random criminal. This was someone who knew exactly where she was going. Emma's blood went cold as pieces clicked together. Marcus Bloodfang, Dominic's warnings about being hunted, the reason she'd spent 18 years instinctively hiding from dangers she couldn't name. She fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers, trying to call Dominic while keeping one eye on her rearview mirror. The call went straight to voicemail. "Dominic, I think I'm in trouble," she whispered into the phone. "Someone's following me, and I think—" The sedan accelerated suddenly, ramming into her rear bumper hard enough to send her car skidding sideways. Emma dropped the phone as she fought to control the vehicle, adrenaline flooding her system as 18 years of suppressed instincts roared to life. She made it to her apartment building on pure terror and muscle memory, abandoning her car in the parking lot and sprinting for the entrance. The sedan's doors slammed behind her, footsteps echoing off concrete as she fumbled for her keys. Evangeline Moonhaven. The voice was cultured, smooth, with the kind of predatory warmth that made her skin crawl. "You've led us quite a chase, little princess." Emma spun around to face 3 men in expensive suits, all of them radiating the kind of barely controlled violence that made her wolf whimper in recognition. The one in front had silver hair and cold blue eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she said, backing toward the building entrance. "My name is Emma Clark." "Is it?" The man smiled, and Emma saw teeth that were just a little too sharp. "Because you look exactly like your mother. Same dark hair, same stubborn chin. Catherine Moonhaven was a beautiful woman. Pity what happened to her." The casual cruelty in his voice made something snap inside Emma's chest. "You killed them." "I did what was necessary." Marcus Bloodfang stepped closer, and Emma caught his scent. Death and decay, and something that made every instinct she had scream danger. "Your parents refused to see reason about territorial boundaries. They paid the price for their stubbornness." "They were good people." "They were weak people who let sentiment cloud their judgment." Marcus's smile widened. "But their daughter is going to be very useful. Do you know what happens to a territory when its bloodline dies out, little princess?" Emma's back hit the building's glass doors. "I don't know what you're talking about." "It reverts to whoever has the strength to claim it. I've been holding Moonhaven lands for 18 years, waiting for the last heir to surface so I could eliminate the problem permanently." Marcus reached into his jacket, and Emma saw the glint of silver. "Your death will make my claim legal and permanent. Nothing personal, you understand." "Actually," a voice said from the shadows, between the buildings, cold and lethal and achingly familiar, "it's very personal." Dominic stepped into the parking lot light, and Emma had never seen anything more beautiful or terrifying in her life. This wasn't the patient, gentle man who'd courted her with poetry and careful touches. This was the Alpha King in all his predatory glory. amber eyes blazing with fury and supernatural power, rolling off him in waves that made the air itself tremble. Steel? Marcus's voice held grudging respect and barely concealed hatred. I should have known you'd interfere eventually. You killed my allies, Dominic said quietly, each word dropping like a stone into still water. You murdered innocents in their sleep. You've spent 18 years hunting a child. He took a step forward, and Marcus's men actually backed up. Did you really think I wouldn't come for you eventually? She's mine by right of conquest, Marcus snarled. Moonhaven territory belongs to me. She's mine by right of fate. Dominic's voice carried absolute authority, the kind of command that made alphas kneel and lesser wolves show their throats. Evangeline Moonhaven is my fated mate, and anyone who threatens her threatens me. The words hit Emma like a physical force, not just the declaration, but the way he said them, like a vow, like a promise, like a threat that could level mountains. Your mate? Marcus laughed, but there was something uneasy in the sound. You're claiming a nobody, a lost little girl who's been hiding among humans for 18 years? I'm claiming my queen. Dominic's eyes found Emma's across the parking lot, and in them she saw something that made her breath catch. Not just love or desire, but recognition. Complete, absolute, soul-deep recognition. The woman who survived everything you threw at her and came out stronger. The last of a bloodline you tried to destroy. The other half of my soul. Something inside Emma cracked open at those words, not breaking, but blooming, like a flower that had been waiting 18 years for sunlight. You want her? Marcus drew the silver knife completely, moonlight gleaming off its edge. Come and take her. Everything happened at once. Marcus lunged forward with supernatural speed, the knife aimed straight for Emma's heart. She tried to move, but terror had frozen her muscles, 18 years of hiding making her forget that she was more than just a frightened girl. Dominic moved faster. One moment he was 20 feet away, the next he was between Emma and the blade, his hand wrapped around Marcus's wrist with enough force to make bones creak. The other two men rushed forward, but Dominic's warriors materialized from the shadows like avenging angels, ending the fight before it could really begin. You will never, Dominic said conversationally, twisting Marcus's wrist until the knife clattered to the pavement, touch what is mine. Marcus dropped to his knees as Dominic's grip tightened, his face going white with pain. This isn't over, Steele. Kill me, and 10 more will take my place. Who said anything about killing you? Dominic's smile was all teeth. You're going to stand trial before the Royal Council for the murder of 2 alphas and the attempted murder of their daughter. You're going to face justice for every crime you've committed over the past 18 years. And then you're going to spend the rest of your very long life in a cell, thinking about what happens when someone threatens my mate. Dominic released Marcus's wrist and stepped back, letting his warriors take custody of the broken man who'd haunted Emma's nightmares for 18 years. Then he turned to Emma, and his expression softened into something so tender it made her chest ache. Are you hurt? Emma stared at him, this impossibly powerful man who'd just dismantled 3 dangerous shifters like they were children, and realized she wasn't scared. For the first time in 18 years, with the golden thread in her chest singing with joy and relief, she felt completely, utterly safe. No, she whispered, I'm not hurt. Good. Dominic held out his hand, palm up, offering rather than demanding. Will you come home with me now, Evangeline? Emma looked at his outstretched hand, then at the man being loaded into an armoured vehicle by warriors who moved with military precision. Marcus Bloodfang, the monster who'd murdered her parents and haunted her dreams, reduced to a broken shell by the man who loved her. Yes, she said, placing her hand in his and watching his entire body relax with relief. Take me home. Dominic's fingers intertwined with hers as he lifted their joined hands to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth spiralling through her entire body. "Welcome home, my queen." The golden thread in Emma's chest pulled tight, and for the first time since she was 6 years old, she understood what belonging felt like. The royal compound was nothing like Emma had imagined, and everything she'd been afraid to hope for. Dominic's private quarters occupied the entire top floor of a building that looked like it had been carved from moonlight and dreams. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that seemed to stretch forever, filled with roses that bloomed in colours she'd never seen before. The furniture was elegant without being ostentatious, comfortable enough to sink into, but beautiful enough to belong in a museum. "It's too much," Emma whispered, standing in the centre of a living room that was larger than her entire apartment. "It's yours," Dominic said simply, watching her with those amber eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. "Everything here is yours, if you want it." Emma turned to face him, this impossibly powerful man who'd just offered her a kingdom, and felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking, but blooming, like a part of her that had been dormant for 18 years was finally waking up. "I don't know how to be a queen," she admitted, wrapping her arms around herself. "I don't know how to be anything other than the girl who hides in libraries and pays rent in cash." "Then we'll figure it out together." Dominic crossed the room with that predatory grace that made her pulse stutter, stopping just close enough that she could feel his warmth. "But Emma, look around, really look." She did, and saw something that made her breath catch. Books, everywhere. Not just decorative volumes chosen for their leather bindings, but actual books. Well-loved copies with cracked spines and margin notes, first editions sitting next to paperbacks, ancient texts sharing shelf space with modern fiction. "You collect books," she whispered. "I collect stories." Dominic's voice was soft, intimate in a way that made the golden thread in her chest hum with contentment. Stories about people who thought they were nobody until they discovered they were everything, about lost princesses finding their way home, about broken things being made whole again. Emma's eyes filled with tears she didn't entirely understand. Why? Because for 30 years I was waiting for someone to share them with. His hand found her chin, tilting her face up until she had no choice but to meet his gaze. "I was waiting for you." The words hung between them like a promise and a confession and a prayer all at once. That night, Emma dreamed about her parents for the first time in 18 years. Not nightmares this time, but memories, real ones, warm and golden and achingly bittersweet. She saw her mother's face clearly now, beautiful and kind with dark eyes that sparkled when she laughed. Heard her father's voice calling her his little star as he spun her around in their garden, roses blooming around them like something out of a fairy tale. She saw the nursery Dominic had described, walls painted with constellations that seemed to move in the candlelight. Remembered the rocking chair by the window where her mother would hold her close and sing about moonlight and starlight and being safe until dawn. She woke to find Dominic sitting in a chair beside the bed, amber eyes alert and concerned. "Bad dreams?" he asked quietly. "Good ones." Emma's voice came out rough with sleep and unshed tears. "I remembered them, my parents. They were real. They were extraordinary." Dominic moved to sit on the edge of the bed, careful not to crowd her, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Your father was one of the wisest Alphas I've ever known. Your mother had a gift for healing that went beyond medicine. They loved each other with the kind of devotion that makes legends. Tell me about them." So he did. For hours, as dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, Dominic told her stories about Thomas and Catherine Moonhaven, about their courtship that scandalised two packs because she was human-born and he was ancient bloodline, about their mating ceremony in a grove of silver birches under the full moon, witnessed by wolves from across the continent, about their joy when Evangeline was born, their absolute devotion to their daughter, and their pack. "They would be so proud of you," Dominic said, as morning light streamed through the windows. "You survived everything that was meant to destroy you. You grew up strong and kind and brilliant, despite every attempt to make you believe you were worthless. I still feel worthless sometimes, Emma admitted, curling into herself. Like I'm pretending to be someone important when really I'm just scared little Emma who doesn't belong anywhere. Hey! Dominic's voice was infinitely gentle as his hand found her face, thumb brushing away tears she didn't realize were falling. Look at me. She did, and saw something in his amber eyes that made her chest ache with possibility. You are Evangeline Moonhaven, he said with absolute conviction. Daughter of Alphas, survivor of genocide, keeper of ancient knowledge, and the other half of my soul. You belong here, with me. In this life, we're going to build together. What if I disappoint you? The question came out broken, 18 years of fear and insecurity bleeding through. What if I'm not strong enough to be what you need? Impossible. Dominic's smile was soft enough to break her heart and fierce enough to rebuild it. You've already survived the impossible. Everything else is just details. The weeks that followed were a strange blend of fairy tale and intensive training. Emma learned to navigate royal council meetings where grown alphas deferred to her opinions on pack history and genealogy. She discovered that her 18 years of research had made her one of the foremost experts on shifter bloodlines in North America, that her knowledge was desperately needed to preserve traditions that were being lost. She learned to dance at state dinners, to smile graciously at visiting dignitaries, to carry herself with the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing she was exactly where she belonged. Most importantly, she learned to trust the golden thread in her chest that sang with joy every time Dominic looked at her like she hung the moon. "There's something I need to tell you," Dominic said one evening as they sat in their private garden, surrounded by roses that bloomed in impossible colours. "About Marcus." Emma tensed despite herself. "What about him?" "The trial ended yesterday. He was found guilty on all charges." Dominic's voice was carefully neutral. "He'll spend the rest of his life in a cell designed to contain alphas who've lost the right to pack protection." "Good!" The word came out fiercer than Emma expected. "He murdered my parents. He tried to murder me. He deserves whatever he gets." He also told us something interesting during his confession. Dominic's hand found hers, fingers intertwining like they were meant to fit together. "There are others, Emma, not just rogues working for him, but pack members who believed his claim to Moonhaven territory was legitimate. Are they going to come after me? No." The absolute conviction in Dominic's voice made her look up. "Because tomorrow, in front of every pack leader on the continent, I'm going to make it very clear that you're under my protection, that you're not just the last Moonhaven heir, but my chosen queen." Emma's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you'll have me, I want to make this official." Dominic slipped off the bench and onto one knee, pulling a ring from his pocket that caught moonlight like captured starfire. "Evangeline Moonhaven, will you do me the honour of becoming my mate, my wife, my queen?" The ring was perfect, not enormous or ostentatious, but clearly ancient, with a stone that seemed to hold all the colours of the aurora borealis, something that spoke of history and tradition and forever. "It was my grandmother's," Dominic said softly. "She told me once that it would know its next owner when the time came." Emma stared at the ring, then at the man offering it, and felt the last wall around her heart crumble completely. "You could have anyone," she whispered. "Any woman in the world would say yes to you. I don't want anyone else." His voice was steady, certain, like he was stating a fundamental law of physics. "I want the brave, brilliant, beautiful woman who survived 18 years of hiding just to find her way back to me. I want the librarian who knows more about our history than scholars who've spent their entire lives studying it. I want my mate, my equal, my other half." "Yes." The word came out breathless, barely audible over the sound of her heart hammering against her ribs. "Yes, of course, yes." Dominic's smile was brilliant enough to light up the entire garden as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her just as long as he had. "I love you," she whispered against his lips as he kissed her, pouring 18 years of loneliness and fear and desperate hope into the words. "I love you too," he murmured back, "my queen, my everything, my home." The golden thread in Emma's chest pulled tight and settled into something warm and permanent and absolutely right. For the first time in 18 years, Evangeline Moonhaven was exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, Evangeline Moonhaven Steele stood before the ancient altar in the grove of silver birches, wearing her mother's wedding dress and her grandmother's crown, and knew that fairy tales were real after all. The ceremony was everything she'd never dared to dream of. Representatives from every pack in North America had come to witness the mating of their Alpha King and his chosen queen. The grove where her parents had pledged their eternal love 30 years ago was filled with candles and roses, and the kind of magic that made the air itself shimmer with possibility. "You look beautiful," Dominic whispered, as they stood beneath the ancient oak where countless generations of wolves had bound their souls together. He wore formal robes that made his amber eyes look like liquid gold, and when he smiled at her, Evangeline felt the golden thread in her chest sing with pure joy. The ceremony itself was a blend of ancient tradition and personal meaning. They spoke vows that had been used for 1,000 years, promising to protect and cherish and stand together through whatever storms might come. But they also wrote their own words, declarations of love that brought tears to the eyes of hardened alphas and made the very trees seem to lean in closer to listen. "I take you as my mate," Dominic said, his voice carrying clearly through the grove, "not because fate chose you for me, but because I choose you every day. Because you survived everything that was meant to destroy you and came back stronger. Because you're brave enough to stand beside me as we build a future worthy of our children." "I take you as my mate," Evangeline replied, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Because you waited 30 years for me to find my way home. Because you taught me that being precious to someone doesn't make you weak, it makes you powerful. Because with you, I'm not hiding anymore. I'm finally, completely myself." The ancient binding ritual was performed by the eldest pack leader, a woman so old she remembered when wolves ran wild in every forest. She painted symbols on their joined hands with sacred oils that smelled of pine and moonlight, speaking words in the old language that made the golden thread between them burn bright as starfire. When Dominic kissed her, sealing their bond for eternity, the entire grove erupted in howls of celebration that echoed across the mountains like thunder. The reception that followed was magnificent, held in the great hall of the royal compound under chandeliers that cast rainbow light across marble floors. Evangeline danced with pack leaders and foreign dignitaries, accepted congratulations from wolves who just months ago wouldn't have known her name, and marvelled at how natural it all felt now. But her favourite moment came later, when the formal celebrations had ended and she found herself alone with Dominic in their private garden. The same garden where he'd proposed, where roses bloomed in impossible colours under a sky full of stars. "Any regrets?" Dominic asked, pulling her close as they swayed to music only they could hear. "Just one," Evangeline said, smiling up at the man who'd become her entire world. "I wish my parents could have been here to see this." They were. Dominic's voice was soft, certain. "Can't you feel them? The way the wind carried our vows, the way the flowers bloomed brighter when you walked down the aisle? They were here, sweetheart. They've been watching over you all along." Evangeline pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the scent that meant safety and love and home, and knew he was right. Somewhere beyond the veil between worlds, Thomas and Catherine Moonhaven were celebrating their daughter's happiness. "I love you," she whispered against his heart. "I love you too, my queen, forever and always." The months that followed were a whirlwind of royal duties and quiet domestic bliss. Evangeline threw herself into her work with the Royal Archives, creating a comprehensive database of pack histories that would preserve their heritage for future generations. She travelled to distant territories, recording the stories of elders before they were lost, building bridges between packs that had been fractured for decades. But her greatest joy came from the small moments. Morning coffee in bed while Dominic read council reports and she organised research notes. Evening walks through their gardens, planning improvements and discussing their future. Quiet nights by the fireplace, reading together in comfortable silence while snow fell outside their windows. It was during one of those peaceful evenings, 6 months after their mating ceremony, that Evangeline felt the first flutter of movement in her belly. "Dominic," she said quietly, setting down her book and placing her hand over the barely noticeable curve beneath her sweater. "What is it?" He looked up immediately, amber eyes alert with concern. "I think—" Evangeline smiled, overwhelmed with a happiness so profound it made her dizzy. "I think we're going to need to start preparing a nursery." Dominic's book hit the floor with a thud. In one fluid motion he was beside her on the couch, his hand covering hers over their growing child. "Are you sure?" "The pack doctor confirmed it this morning." Evangeline laughed at the expression of stunned joy on his face. "We're having a baby, Dominic, a little prince or princess who's going to grow up knowing exactly how much they're loved." "A baby," Dominic repeated, wonder creeping into his voice. "Our baby. With your eyes and my stubborn streak, probably." "God help us all," Dominic murmured, but his smile was brilliant enough to light up the entire room. He kissed her then, soft and reverent and full of promises about the future they were building together. That night, as Evangeline fell asleep in her mate's arms with his hand protectively curved over their child, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a terrified 6-year-old hidden among humans to a confident queen planning for the next generation of wolves. From believing she was nobody to knowing she was everything to the man who loved her. The golden thread in her chest hummed with contentment, no longer pulling her towards something she was missing, but settling warm and permanent around everything she'd found. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new joys. But tonight, surrounded by love and safety and the promise of forever, Evangeline Moonhaven Steele was exactly where she belonged, home.